Hey guys, and welcome to a somewhat unfortunate Red Shadow Remembers video. I wasn't even necessarily at first going to do it as a Red Shadow Remembers, but I don't know. The more I thought about this particular person and this topic, I thought it kind of worked hand in hand with the format of this video, which is me reminiscing about something that doesn't necessarily, doesn't exist, or it isn't still in production or whatever, but is rather something that I just haven't been a part of myself for a long time. Anyway, because of this as a serious subject matter, I'd rather just get into what I'm talking about, and that is the untimely passing of a favorite ESPN sportscaster of mine by the name of Stuart Scott, who passed away yesterday morning due to cancer that he's been dealing with since he was diagnosed in 2007. It was a real big shock to me for a lot of different reasons. One, the guy was only 49 years old. That means he's only 9 years older than I was. He's been dealing with cancer now for 7 or 8 years, which means he was diagnosed with it when he was probably like 42, 43 or something like that. It's just a shocker for me, now that I'm in my 40s, to think of somebody who I've looked up to and enjoyed watching on television, that he would die so young. And that was a shock. It was also a shock simply because, as I said, the reason why I'm doing this as a Red Shadow Remembers video is because I haven't seen ESPN, Sportscenter, anything like that has to do with ESPN for 4 or 5 years now, because I haven't had cable since I've been single. So I haven't got to enjoy ESPN and Sportscenter, and that's the part of this that I want to talk about first, really quick, hopefully, in the sense of a Remembers video, because I loved SportsCenter and I loved ESPN programming, especially the the kind of show that SportsCenter was, sort of like a sports news program that would play a couple of different times during the day. I first got into ESPN and sports in general, like from my own personal perspective of I'm interested in this and I want to read about it and watch it and absorb it. In the early 90s, and SportsCenter was really, really big. Stuart Scott joined. He joined in ESPN and in SportsCenter in 1993. So yeah, that's right around about the time that I was totally into watching and consuming sports broadcasting, baseball and football and just in general, like SportsCenter type programming, ESPN, things like Baseball Tonight for baseball, because that's my favorite of the sports, all their football coverage, the ESPN news station, which in my way felt like it was very repetitive, but it was like SportsCenter 24 hours a day. Loved that, and I loved that all of these hosts and co-hosts on these programs were just really engaging and interesting folks. People who came up with catchphrases, people who had energy and passion for the business. And those are the kind of things that really exemplify who Stuart Scott was to me. He was funny. He was always into it. He was always on. He had a slew of catchphrases that everybody knows, like his "cooler than the other side of the pillow," "booyah." I was just looking over some of that stuff here on Wikipedia, and I surprised myself that I had forgotten a few of his catchphrases. Stuart Scott was not necessarily, like somebody that I know, like any celebrities, anybody on television. You don't know them. You don't really know who they are as a person. But I've always felt like broadcasters, whether they're news people or especially in sports, they are themselves when they're on camera. If they are somebody else, if they're acting because they're not truly sports lovers, then it shows, and usually they don't last long. They move on to something else. But like I said, Stuart Scott was not one of those people. He was the perfect example of a sports broadcaster and someone who loved the games that he covered, who loved what he did. He loved being able to talk about it. You know, a lot of times when somebody is not good at sports but they love sports, that's where they end up. They may manage or coach, or they may broadcast. It's just something that goes hand in hand. I was just reading about how Stuart Scott was one of the few African-American sportscasters on ESPN programming who wasn't a former athlete. I think that's probably something he was very proud of, to say that, you know, an African-American gentleman or woman can be a part of something like ESPN without having to be that stereotype of, you know, he must be an athlete, he must be a player. I don't know. I heard about the story yesterday while I was at work from a guy who works there who was just like, I don't know, some guy named Stuart, and I was like, maybe it's Stuart Scott. Had passed away, and I knew they had been diagnosed with cancer a few years back and had been dealing with it, but since I'd been detached from ESPN, I didn't know what the situation was with it. Of course, according to this, he had stopped being a part of ESPN sometime last year. I assume that doesn't mean that it was because of his death, but I kind of lost my train of thought there for a second, but when I heard about it at work, because I had been detached from ESPN for a while, I hadn't really given much thought to, you know, how he was dealing with, you know, his diagnosis, which apparently he was cleared from it for a while, but then re-diagnosed again in 2011 and 2013 with cancer. It was appendix cancer. That's where it started anyway, and unfortunately, he did not win the battle in life, but I've seen where he's been quoted as saying that dying to cancer is not losing to it. It's how you live your life. I don't have the exact quote up here. It was a good quote, but I'm not going to try to dig it up. It's what I would expect from Mr. Scott, to be classy and inspirational to the end. I kind of sort of feel myself a little bit getting emotional about it. I got emotional about it yesterday when I came home and I saw the stuff about it on Facebook, and I read a little bit more, and I watched Rich Eisen giving like a short tribute during a broadcast. Eisen, I think, is now a part of the NFL Network. Yeah, he's with the NFL Network and must have been doing some programming for them, and had a chance to talk about his friendship with Stuart Scott, and it got to me. It really did. Like I said, when I watched these guys, they were my eyes and ears and my voice for sports for all those years in the 90s and into the 2000s. Like I said, I was addicted to ESPN, Sportscenter, ESPN News, Baseball Tonight, all the different programming. I can't say enough. Some of these names on this screen here I'm looking at: John Anderson, Chris Berman, Linda Cohn, Neil Everett, Todd Grisham, Steve Levy, Bob Lee, Kenny Mayne, Carl Ravitch, he's big on Baseball Tonight, Peter Gammons, Hannah Storm, Scott Van Pelt. Some of the former anchors here, I know I'm going to see some of these names: Rich Eisen, Chris Fowler, Kevin Frazier, Brian Kenny, Craig Kilborn, Susie Colbert, Chris Myers, Keith Olbermann, Dan Patrick. You know, love all these guys. Robin Roberts, another cancer survivor. Mike Tirico. A lot of these other ones I still recognize a lot more names on here, but these were all people who just, like I said, they brought sports to me every day, multiple times of the day. I'm a guy who, I don't know how much of this I've ever talked about here on my channel, but I'm a big sports fan. But when I was a kid, as much as I loved baseball, I was scared to death of the ball, and I was scared to death to play in front of people, scared that I was going to screw up. So I was sort of like this closet sports fan. Tried to turn my back on it because I couldn't play the game, and I wasn't, the anxiety issues and all that kind of stuff. It kept me, I wasn't confident in my skills and my abilities. So I kept it all inside, and I was finally able to kind of open up to sports stuff by watching ESPN. I watched baseball games, like crazy. I loved baseball stuff in general, but I just didn't play, and I kind of lived vicariously both through athletes. But what was more accessible to me was ESPN and news or sportscasts. That was way more accessible to me, and it allowed me to enjoy sports on a level I never would have otherwise. And I regret that I didn't play baseball and I didn't try, but at least I had these folks, those names that I just read off to you, and Stuart Scott among those, to put me there and to paint that picture for me. And it was just, like I said, it was entertaining. These guys were funny. These guys were just great at improvising. They were great at telling me the things that I probably wouldn't have figured out on my own. And that's what I will remember about Stuart Scott. That's what I remember about all of that until the day comes when perhaps I have cable again and I can watch it all again. But right now, I just have my memories, and I really, really loved every one of those guys, and Stuart Scott was amongst some of my favorites, along with guys like Dan Patrick and Keith Olbermann when they were a pair, and just so many of those guys. And just like I said, I can't hardly believe that Stuart Scott has passed away. So I just want to say that my thoughts and prayers are with his family, with his daughters. He had 2 daughters, with all of his friends and sportscast mates from ESPN and any other organizations he was with, and with all the fellow fans like me, people who loved to watch him when he hosted Sportscenter and any of the other programs he did. My thoughts and prayers are with everybody, and Stuart Scott, I hope you are resting in peace now, and thanks for being an inspiration. Thanks for entertaining me and amusing me so many times over the years, and being there with me for that entire ride. Stories I could probably tell if I thought they would be entertaining enough for people about watching Sportscenter and dreaming about being a baseball player and collecting baseball cards and all that fun stuff back in the 90s. It meant a lot. And Stuart Scott, some people may not understand why a guy like me would be so enamored with a fellow like him and be so upset and touched and going through these emotions over the death of a sportscaster. But it really meant a lot to me, and I just wanted to sit down and talk about that for a minute in this video. Like I said, rest in peace, Stuart Scott, and my thoughts and prayers are with everybody out there who are touched by this as well. Thanks a lot for watching, guys.